Welcome to Elixir Wizards, a podcast brought to you by SmartLogic, a custom web and mobile development shop based in Baltimore. My name is Chris Keathley, and I'll be your host. And I'm joined today by my co-hosts, the wondrous Amos King and nebulous Anna Neyzberg. Say hi, everybody.
Hello.
This season's theme is Adopting Elixir, and we're joined today by special guests, Justus, Eric, and Sundi. Say hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, we're so glad you guys could be here.
Thanks for having us.
It's really a pleasure. Been looking forward to this moment my entire life.
I'm sure you have.
I love this idea, right? I thought it would be fun as someone who has been on the other side of the podcast game, right? I thought it'd be fun to give all of y'all a chance to talk through your own ideas, right? Like because often like when you're doing this, right, you're sitting and listening to the guest, you want to like give the guest time to speak. You don't get to like always get into all of your feelings about a topic, right? Because you're trying to be respectful of their time and everything. And now the floor is yours. It's open, right? It's open for whatever you want to say, right? That's what we're really creating here today, is a moment to get all the takes and all the feelings and all that stuff you just have to hold back during a normal episode. Now you get to like cut loose.
So this was your idea?
Yes. Wait,
Jeez,
no, it was
Eric
my idea.
came up with it.
No.
Oh man, this was a good idea then.
Chris,
all of a sudden, it's a good idea.
Chris told me about it, and then I was pairing with Eric, and I told Eric about it. So you're kind of like last to know, Justin.
Wait, I didn't know about it.
That's pretty good.
Y'all don't tell me anything either, so it's fine.
No, we've
Anna.
talked about this.
All right.
I'm just an ideas man, right? Like I don't,
Sorry, Justus,
I
I
don't
missed
make
that.
anything happen. I think the idea, right, is we wanted to go into this y'all are starting a new season. You're approaching a new topic for this season. Topic, like I said, is going to be adopting Elixir. And so I am curious to kind of dig into it and find out, how did you adopt Elixir? Like, how did y'all get into this whole thing?
We might have covered this a few times in different episodes or whatever, but the original, we had a coworker, Travis, who used to work here and has since left, but he was interested in Elixir and functional programming, and we had a small project. It was like 2 weeks long, so if Elixir turned out to be junk, then we could rewrite it in Rails real quick, and it would be fine. Luckily, I think that thing is still chugging along 4 years later without anyone doing anything to it on some Heroku app somewhere, and it went well, and that like caught my interest after he kind of showed it off. And I think change sets were the original thing that I was like most intrigued by, coming from a Rails callback land and all the pain that comes with that sometimes. And so we did another project that went most of the way and then pittered out for various reasons, the startups will. And that was our first time using channels, I think, and doing a chat app and all the fun stuff that you do with that. Yeah, and then after that, I think Dan likes to say we've started like 22 new applications and only one of them has been Elixir since we've like made the jump, which is always, I don't know, it's like a cool
Only one of them was not Elixir.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, and then that was because we thought we were going to hand it off to a team that knows Rails, and then we just ended up being their whole team the whole time, so we could have just done it in Elixir and been fine.
I basically learned Elixir as part of that process because I joined the team probably the month that Travis, maybe the month after. It was definitely within like a couple of months of Travis sort of bringing Elixir into the fold here at SmartLogic. And Sundi, I actually don't know how you, I guess,
Oh,
Kava?
yes. Yes. Apparently, before this call started, he thought I was the Elixir community guru and that I knew everybody. And then I mentioned I hadn't ever actually met everyone here yet. And it all came out. So, it was at Kava. The back end was Elixir, front end was React. I knew React going in, but not Elixir. And they said, no worries. We'll teach you. Spent about 2 months just kind of getting ramped up on it. And then they sent me to Lone Star Elixir in 2019. It's when I met Justus and Eric. And took my first course with Bruce Tate, and just it spun from there. I got really excited about the community after that conference, and started getting more involved with DC Elixir. I was always into meetups, and I really wanted to help that meetup grow in our area, in the DC area. So I had a more active role in that. And just from that, just got more into writing it. As I wrote it more, I just loved it more. It was just, I mean, I was coming from JavaScript, and we've talked about this a little bit on the show, but it just didn't click for me the way Elixir does. I always say Elixir to me reads like English. And if you really write good Elixir code, you can show it to someone who can't program at all, and they'll know what's going on if you really write it well. That's always been my take. So that's sort of been my journey in the Elixir world.
That's awesome.
Where did you all start out in your career as a developer? What was your first foray into software?
So professionally was actually this job. Non-professionally was my math teacher taught me basic on the TI-83, and then English class was never the same as I hit a calculator and made RPGs.
Perfect.
What about the rest of y'all?
Someone in college had an underground market of games you could buy from him that were all like TI-89 and TI-83 games, all in basic. Like I remember, I think I paid him like $5 for Asteroids or something like that, just for him to he just had these, and he just didn't wire. He had the whole thing where he could it's like it's whatever the headphone jack was, right? Because here's the thing: anything can be a serial port if you try hard and believe in yourself. So you can he just had the little headphone jack. He wired it up and sent it over to me. It made a lot of material science classes a lot more bearable.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, a lot of people were into the calculator stuff. I don't feel like if I had to predict that this was the path I was going to go down, I don't know that I could have. I was very heavy on the art side, on the English side. I really liked writing and drawing and all of that stuff, and I was really bad at math, so I just really didn't think this was going to happen. But I think what was my first job? Internship, I guess. I was a computer science major. I don't know. That just happened.
What made you decide to do that?
It's mostly that my parents just wanted me to, and I didn't know what I wanted to major in.
That's fair.
I went to a state school, so I figured if I wanted to change my mind, it would be easy. I did, in fact, change my mind. I actually graduated with an art degree, but I was coding the whole time. I was doing coding to make art and coding in internships and all that stuff outside of school. And then in school, it was painting. So, it worked out.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I always call it my great hack of college. I had a lot of free time.
That's awesome.
Well, see, my hack of college was taking computer science because I had a lot of free time too.
Was computer science an easy? So I didn't study computer science in college, but it sounds like you're saying it's an easy major. But it sounded to me like
I think he was just bragging.
Yeah,
it was easy for me.
Humble brag. Humble brag.
This is my friend. Was constantly he was an art major, and he never had free time, so that was my takeaway. Also, you could get a degree to the college I went to without actually programming, which is interesting.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Kind of surprising, but
how does that work?
Whatever they did, the CS and CIS degrees, so computer information systems were taking the same courses.
It's like college level A+.
Yeah, so you could weasel your way through and write term papers instead of programming for most of the courses, and still get a bachelor's in CS.
Isn't it easier just to write the code?
Yeah.
See, that's my thought. Yeah, I would so much rather have just written code for every exam. So that'd be fine.
But writing code on paper was really hard. It was really confusing.
Yeah.
You didn't have to do that, Eric?
I totally had to do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did you get a computer science degree or
no? I got an electrical engineering degree.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
So I had 2 actual quote unquote CS classes, right? And it was basically intro to C++ is what it really was. But yeah, one of our tests was literally you had to write code semantically correct and syntactically correct C++ with a piece of paper. So it was obscene.
That's what always got me. There would be a bunch of little red circles at the end of the lines, you forgot your semicolons on every one of these.
Brackets don't match. That's enough on an editor.
Right? Where there's something helping you. Oh my God.
At least it wasn't handwritten Lisp.
Well, that would have been better. That would have been so much better.
I would have never
Then
made
C++, yes.
Did all of you do, except for Sundi because you did art, but it sounds like you did computer science courses.
I was a computer science major for 2 years. Okay. And then it was really, really hard for me. So I switched. After my first boss, my first ever job, he told me, if you're really struggling that much, you really don't have to graduate with a CS degree to do this job. And that was the first time anyone had told that to me. So I went home, I told my dad, he was like, well, what are you going to do? And I said, art. He was like, I said, but my boss said I could be a front-end engineer. And then my dad took that, he took a night, took a day, maybe 24 hours. He looked it up online and he said, yeah, front-end engineers look like they have a salary range of this to this. Okay, you can do that. And I was like, I was good. I didn't have a choice. I had retaken calculus too many times to continue anyways. So there was really no choice there.
That's so man. I did not get a CS degree. I got a degree in political science and chemistry.
Oh, really? I also studied poli-sci and econ and philosophy. Yeah.
Oh, that's so accurate. I was going to ask you,
so
Justus,
surprised.
Yeah, I would have never guessed, actually.
I mean, if you just listen to the show, you might not know. I did not finish. I was kicked out for being too radical. But it was funny because while I was in college, I was making money writing people's papers and making WordPress sites and stuff like that. It was like a natural transition to have to go and then make money kind of in fake startup land.
I'm just curious as what kind of radical thinking.
What happened?
Philosophy and political science.
Well, okay, so I'm not going to get into the radical part, but I will tell. At West Virginia, I went to state school too. I went to West Virginia University, and they had what's called a multidisciplinary study, so you could make your own major out of 3 minors. And so Oxford had a program for political science, economics, and philosophy, and I was obsessed with that stuff even in high school. Or even before that probably. And so I was like, oh, this will make college so easy for me if I can take these. And I actually did it even worse. I'll tell you guys, if you go to a lot of schools have this thing called the interstate common market or something like that. And basically it's like a rule where if you declare a major that's not offered in your home state, you can get in-state tuition at an out-of-state school. And at West Virginia, you could declare a major, but take whatever credits you wanted. So I took credits for the major I wanted, but declared some made up major, like sports physiology or journalism or some nonsense like that, in order to get in-state tuition. And then what I did was I helped all my friends. I helped all my friends do the same thing. Anyone that was from Pennsylvania, New Jersey in this interstate common market thing, I helped them save money. And then their parents would give me a 10, part of their savings. Because the difference was huge, right? You're going from 35 grand a year to 15 grand a year. And it was oh yeah, I'll give you $1,500 to do that for me. And
I wish the listeners could see our faces right now.
I just love that you're I love that the school is you can't just have that major because you said you want that major. And you're I didn't say it, I declared it.
Well, that's exactly it. You would declare a major and you would go to your advisor and your advisor would be well, in order to do that major, you're going to need to take these classes, but you go and register for classes completely separately. I was just in all these philosophy and econ and poli-sci courses, just dodging for the life of me anything math related. Yeah, it worked out great until, I don't know.
Until you got kicked out?
Yeah, until second semester of sophomore year. Different story. One day I'd love to, if I'm ever if this podcast ever gets big, I would love to do an exposure on that. It'll be a fun story, but not today.
I thought I was a rebel because I audited typography.
What does that mean? What does that even mean?
I just sat in on a typography class.
Auditing a class is not illegal, Keathley.
No, I know. I just did it though.
How do you
really?
It's really hard to write other people's papers without auditing.
They don't freaking take attendance. You just show up. I don't know.
Yeah, it's true. Almost I went to a big state school, so all the UCs, the classes are 500 people, so nobody.
Wait, so which school was that, Anna?
UC San Diego.
Nice. And Sundi, what state school did you go to?
University of Maryland, College Park.
Oh man, you guys went to good ones. Over here, West Virginia University, best known for burning couches.
I will say
best at burning couches, right?
I recently went to.
Listen, there's no such thing as bad press.
I went to WVU last year to help out with the electrical engineering robotics competition thing with the IEEE stuff I do, and I was sincerely impressed by everything I saw. So I don't know. They seemed really impressive to me.
It's actually, one thing I learned about state universities is just they have so many resources that they can provide amazing facilities and amazing programs in whatever they're good at. West Virginia had a really good petroleum engineering program and a very good business program and a pretty good poli-sci program. So yeah, there's definitely benefits to just going to a big school for no other reason that they offer a lot of resources.
Did you see yourself programming? while you're there? Or
No, it's my
after?
dad was a tech guy growing up, and so I thought it was nerdy and boring. And I don't know about you guys if you had technical parents, but my dad growing up, I'd want to go online and play games on cartoonnetwork.com or whatever, and you'd have to like download, the newest Flash version, and I'd be like, Dad, how do I install Flash? Because I'm like 6, and he's like, I don't know, figure it out. And I'm like, all right, well, you're very helpful, IT professor. He was literally the chief information officer of the county that I lived in. Like, he knows stuff. And he would just pretend.
So I have a quote for you from a friend. My friend's father works as a handyman, and I think his grandfather or something asked why is your house always in state of fixing up or whatever? You never finish project. And then his single response was, the cobbler's son has no shoes. So he just didn't want to do it.
That's so funny.
That's really funny.
I'm super curious. So SmartLogic itself, right, is you basically have one champion who just says, I want to do Elixir.
Yeah, I was curious.
And then just makes it happen. That's super interesting. There's a bunch of things that I want to dive into there. One is, as a consultancy, anytime you stake your consultancy on a tech, right, there's an inherent risk there. So I'm super interested to see how that all went. Beyond that too, I want to circle back to the comment you made earlier, something about that Elixir reads to you like English. And that's super, I super want to delve into that at some point. I want to come back around to that as well. But just because I think that's an interesting take. That's a very different take than I think a lot of people have when they look at the language, especially if you've got a number of programming years under your belt or whatever. So that's super interesting to me too. So I want to circle back to both of those, but we'll start with the SmartLogic thing because I think that's interesting. And
I want to add to your SmartLogic question, in addition to just adopting a tech and putting time into it, was there any, were folks just all psyched, or was there any, was it hard to get other folks at SmartLogic psyched about learning and picking up new tech, or what was that process like? I'm curious about that in addition to Keathley's question.
So as far as that went, I think it was just Travis was the only one excited. I remember being down on Elixir because I was like, ugh, functional programming. It's just going to be parens and everywhere, and it's going to be super academic, and no thank you. I think it was kind of up until we did that project, and then there was a lunch talk or two of intro to Elixir, kind of walking through the project, how did it go, retrospective type thing. And so I think that was the day that caught my eye and started looking more into it. And so I think that was just kind of, I got interested, a few others got interested, and then that was kind of how we spurred that off, I think.
And were you already getting a lot of Elixir work, or was that what came first?
We became interested and kind of made Elixir happen for clients because we had a few that came in and said, I just have this idea, make it. And we said, okay, we're going to use Elixir. And they go, I don't know what that is. Sure.
Whatever.
As long as it works, that's all we care.
What were the size of the clients that were allowing you to do that? Because in my experience, bigger clients have a tendency to say, heck no, here's what you're using. And little clients are I don't care. But I was wondering about your experience, if you had been able to sell it to bigger clients or not.
So the very first project, I'm not entirely certain. I think they're on the website, but I'm not super sure. So I'll leave it sort of vague, but they're a very big company. But this was a slide in the door in the back door, because it was just some HR tiny little app that they just needed to help. It's schedule people working on different things. The next app was a small startup. There was 4 people, I think, just kind of ideas people. And they were totally self-funded because it was just, and they just didn't care. So
that's cool.
As you're starting to take on more clients, right? As you're starting to, or not even take on more clients, but that's wrong to say it. But as you're starting to build Elixir applications for more clients, right? And this kind of gets back to my earlier question about, I think it's awesome that anyone in the world has said, I think Elixir is super easy to read. Because I agree with that, but I'm also not able to emotionally distance myself at this point from the way I feel about this. So what does that onboard look like, right? You get people excited, and obviously if you're excited about something, you're more apt to learn it, right? But what do you do as a company who thinks that this is the way to go? And how do you start training people? How do you get people, how do you get your staff excited about what does that look like? What are the resources that you're going to be able to do that?
I can speak a little bit to my onboarding process at Kava, like not knowing the language. Like I said, I knew one of the languages, right? I knew React, I knew JavaScript. So I remember my first few weeks, I was given, I think it's really productive in a first week of onboarding to assign somebody something real to do, something small, but real, tangible. So they get a feel for the process and how to work with the team. And they don't just feel like they're sitting in onboarding meetings for the full week, and give them a small win, essentially. And that's what I got. I think I literally just had to add a button to a page on the app. I did it in React, and I got familiar with the code base and sort of how everything runs. Like I actually had to run the backend server, run the IEX session to run it locally. And then that's how I got familiar with like the IEX session. But I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, doing that to get to the React part. And, I solved one little bug in React, and then I was on my way. And then we started like delving into Elixir once I was comfortable with the team and the setup and how the daily stand-ups and the dynamic worked, so that I could, not learn everything new all at once. But yeah, I don't know, Justus, how was your first learning Elixir? What did it look like to you when you first saw it?
So I don't even remember what the specific project was, so I cannot give away any proprietary details, but I just remember being kind of put on a project and asked to build some features and having to learn it. The one thing that does stand out as being a turning point in my learning Elixir would be like a few weeks in, pattern matching, like just kind of clicking in my head and becoming this amazing superpower that I wish I had in all my programming languages. So I think that was like the hurdle that once you leap it of understanding what it is and why it's valuable. And when I say pattern matching, I don't just mean in the context of like variable assignment or whatever. I also mean like function declarations and kind of all of the features in Elixir that are related to that. That for me was like the hurdle that once I leapt it, the beauty of the language became super apparent to me.
I had that moment too with pattern matching. I don't remember when it was, but I remember it happening.
I'm kind of surprised people don't talk about it more, because so many people come from the Ruby community, and outside of pattern matching, there's so many similarities. And it seems like the first thing that's like a real big paradigm shift that changes your ability to be productive and write beautiful code.
Yeah. And I think maybe, Chris, to your point about like the way it looks to me that makes it easier to read is, I mean, if you think about a JavaScript function, it's a function to do something, and then you have to defensively program against, like, it's not null. And the thing that you're reading from that object that's not null, it also can't be null. And then, you have to do a few checks and a few other things. And at some point, your if statement looks pretty nasty. I call it the nasty if. You've got like several, and then there are ways to clean that up, of course. But maybe my natural disposition is always to write it terribly and then fix it. Write down what comes to my head and edit it later. That helps me think through the way I'm going to write it. When you look at it that way, and then you start seeing like the arrow functions were confusing to me, because all of a sudden there were so many things that were gone, and I didn't know what any of the symbols meant. Just by looking at it now, it's like muscle memory. But for somebody who's trying to get used to coding, like in general, to see a lot of symbols and not know what they mean, how do you know that that's returning implicitly without a return? Like there were just so many things you had to know how it was working. And it was just really hard to look at and read without really knowing it. And this is when I was, of course, learning JavaScript. And then when I was learning Elixir, I didn't feel like there were hidden things that were happening. I didn't feel like there was magic happening. I could see what was going on, and I could follow the code. And I really liked, like, I think, Justus, what did you call it? The pattern matching of the functional definitions?
Function declarations.
Yep.
There's a real name for that, isn't there?
Clause. But yes.
Function clause.
Clause.
Mm-hmm.
Like Talon's clause? Or
Yeah. Like those you might find upon a kestrel.
Whoa!
Speaking of D&D,
predatory bird reference.
But yeah, once you start looking at it that way, and you see, I had to explain to so many people at first, like who weren't Elixir writers or devs, and they were like, "Why would you write this function declaration twice, 3 times? Why don't you just like handle it all in one place?" And I was like, "Why would you handle it all in one place? It's harder to follow. This way you can like log each one and see which one gets called if you're confused." Like, I don't know. It's just also a lot of it has to do with naming things properly. you can write, it's possible to write bad Elixir code where, it's hard for people to follow it. That's obviously possible. That's possible in every language. But in Elixir, when you write a function definition and you really do a good job of creating and following a convention, I think it's easy to follow and swap things in and out and really trace the code down. I think it's much easier just to read it.
So with that being easier to read, is it also when you start on something new, are you able to get to code faster than you were with JavaScript? Or are you getting the code faster with JavaScript, but happier with the Elixir that's coming out?
I think there are different situations. I remember one time, there was one moment at Kava where our product manager wrote the most beautiful ticket, the most technical ticket, and there was really good acceptance criteria, and there was a nice to have at the bottom of the ticket. And I remember looking at the nice to have and being I know how to write this in Elixir. I know exactly what I need to do. I know how to write this fallback case. That was the nice to have. And I just went for it, and it was clear. I can't say I ever had that moment in JavaScript, but I don't know, maybe I didn't try hard enough. I didn't stay in the community long enough. Yeah.
I've been writing a lot of JavaScript these days, and it's just JavaScript.
Trying to throw it a bone.
I think there is something to the idea too, and I've experienced this so many times where there's something. I've tried to work on a grand unified field theory thing for Elixir and my happiness with it, but there is something. My ability to solve a certain subset of problems is just easier. It's it's just I'd have to really stop and think. If I was going to do this in C, I'd have to really stop and think about how I'm going to go about it, or Java or anything like that. And I'm oh, I just do this. And part of that's familiarity for sure, but part of there is just the runtime and everything else. Right?
Yeah, I will say that the time that this really shone through for me, what you're talking about right now, is I spent the entire summer job searching. I landed working at SmartLogic in August, but I spent the whole summer job searching. And every time I had to do the dreaded code interview, they would give it to me and they'd ask me this. I mean, I was looking for both, JavaScript and Elixir jobs. My preference was Elixir, but Elixir market this summer was really hard. And I remember every time I got a JavaScript code challenge, I would look at it and I'd be I know how to do this in Elixir, but I have no idea how to tackle this in JavaScript. And it would take me so much longer. And I don't know, it was rough. I now know that I need to do both in order to not lose one or the other. Over time, you're going to lose whatever you're not using. That was definitely hard. I will say that while I was writing Elixir at Kava, I very rarely did JavaScript. So that's definitely why that was harder for me this summer.
And Keathley can relate. You can ask him about trying to write a UI widget not too long ago.
Oh, yeah. It took me all day. It took me all day. I made a modal, though. But at the end of the day, that modal both appeared and disappeared. So nailed it. You mentioned something about having good conventions. And as we're talking about teams starting to bring Elixir into their stack, right? And level up the people who your employees, and level up everybody who's working with you. Are there conventions that y'all have adopted as a company that you found to be really useful? I know that at one point, I remember, I think one of y'all was talking about name changes you've made to the standard Phoenix directories and stuff like that. You're this should just be everything, right? That's the kind of idea, right? There's those tactical sort of conventions that you've placed inside your own projects. Is there stuff like that you have?
Yeah. So anytime we start a new Phoenix project, I guess as of March-ish, this was the case. We would do a Phoenix new, and then I would I have a suite of things that I would run through and just clean it up. So I would move the app web to just be web, and then update all the references for that. And I think there was, at this point I can't remember another, and I'm mixing in some Rails things because for some reason I want to say drop Spring Boot, but that's obviously not here.
Just habit, force of habit.
Yeah. But now we have a called Stein example. So this is an application that uses a library that is pretty close to the phxgen auth, whatever that package is.
Oh, right.
So it has it's devised super light. So it just comes with common things that looking up an email and verifying its password, and making sure that if the email isn't found, it does the bcrypt no opt whatever, so that the to try and prevent timing attacks and all that. It also sets up comes with user auth. It comes with password resets and all that junk that the first week of a project is the first thing you do every ways, all the time. And eventually after the sixth time of doing it is I'm so done with this. Let's just copy paste and replace names. And so that's what that project is now. So it's kind of been, I guess, codified in terms of what we do for a new project. So now we can just clone the repo, delete.git, rename. There's 4 different git greps and seds that we can do. And we have a new project that's off to the races to start dropping in stuff.
Nice.
That's cool.
I would imagine that's also really helpful for onboarding new folks and getting them started. Is that true?
Yes. This also kind of bundles in our deployment. So it comes with Roku, it comes with a Docker Compose, and then normal deployment. And so it kind of tries to set up everything you would possibly need. And we need to bump up its README so that you can come with a better README. But I guess, yes, hopefully having something more standardized across projects means that you can move around them easier.
Totally.
So after, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Keathley. It's fine.
So I was thinking a bit about, so it sounds like you at this point are mostly, everybody's learning via mentorship and just common knowledge around the company and then whatever resources you get your hands on, right? Through the course of that and just you're working with other new teams or new products, is do you feel like there's resources that I guess are missing or things that you would wish you could point people to?
I always thought that there was never a really good intro to Elixir resource out there when I was brand new. I had a 5 weeks lead time before my Kava job started. And I remember thinking, well, I know there's Christmas in here, but it's 5 whole weeks. So maybe I'll look into it. And I just didn't see a lot of resources. Almost every book, you read the first page and it's this is an intermediate book where you have to have some familiarity with Elixir concepts. And I've always wished that there was something like that out there. So with the meetup, we did a few this year. Some intro to Elixir, and we advertised outside of the Elixir community to see, more people would show up and how they like it. And Justus, we did talk a lot about pattern matching. My strategy for that was I just said, these are the shiny things that I love about Elixir. It was half a pitch and half not functional. Yeah, no, functional. I don't know. Yeah, it was half a pitch and half functional because I was these are the things that I like about it. This is why I think it's great to work in. And here are the fun things you get to work with if you get to use it. And I think that fits really well into the hour that meetups usually take.
I think I would agree with you, Sundi. I think putting together intro resources, especially for folks that are new to the language and the paradigm and the ecosystem, is really hard. And it's really hard to find good resources. Definitely experience that. Sorry, Justus, I totally cut you off.
No worries. And I'll third that assertion because I agree that there need to be more introductory resources. But I will give people who are listening a hack, which I learned in my very first job programming. So my very first job programming, I was the first employee at a company called Pavlok, which you can look up. It's amazing. I did not know what I was doing, building Rails APIs. And what I would do is I would call my good friend, Johnny Borsiquo, who's now the big dog in the local Go community. And he would just help me. And I would basically pay him out of pocket a lot of the times to kind of consult with me. But he often just helped me for free and helped me get a lot of stuff over the hump. And I will reassure anybody who thinks that sounds a little bit unusual by letting them know that I won't name names, even though I probably already named names in the past on the show about who people who work at one company who trade open source work to do work on the company work. You know what I'm talking about? Everybody here knows because they've all heard the stories at conferences. But there's that kind of thing where you can reach out to people and get help, especially when you're just getting started. And people definitely want to help folks who help themselves, right? Not just asking for free work. Nobody likes the guy on Stack Overflow who asks for full-on solution to a problem. But the community is super duper helpful. And the other, I think, hack would be, starting a podcast made it really easy for us to know all of the people in the community. I mean, if I wanted to reach out to Renee Foring to talk about, some issue I'm having with Credo, he would be there like that. Or if I needed to talk to Frank about nerves, anyone, they're always available. And I'm not saying go start a podcast, but I am saying that when you get involved in the community, you get more avenues of soliciting help.
Yeah, that's definitely
true.
been my experience as well. Like, also don't start a podcast because apparently no one listens to them according to that
survey.
Survey. So, but yeah, no, I mean, that's totally been my experience of it. There's a reason that we can get certain fixes into certain libraries quickly, right? Because we know these people who work on those things, right? So if you have problems, you can just like hit those people up, which is really useful.
But I would also say for folks that are getting started who don't have those resources, right? Like, people in the community, I found generally, which is one thing that attracted me to the community however long ago, it's been a while now, but like, people generally are really nice and really helpful. And
you could reach out to anyone on this call except for me.
That's true.
And
because he's going to be in Florida, he's out.
He's going to be in Miami. He's
going to be on the beach. Yeah, sorry.
He's going to be living in his bathtub at whatever place.
Can I wait? Let me just plug my good friends here, because both Eric and Sundi were nominated to like these like influential technologist lists in DC and Baltimore respectively. Eric doesn't even live in Baltimore, and he made this like list of influential technologists. I'm over here jumping into bathtubs on camera in front of 1,000 people, and people are just like, who?
They don't have influential bathtub diving awards.
It's just
if they did, it would be you.
I think you had to be one of the highlights of ElixirConf. I knew people who didn't know anything about ElixirConf other than the fact that you hosted the whole thing from your bathtub. So this is how legends are born. Come on.
Yeah, it's only going to get worse. The rumors around that are only going to get worse. 2 years from now, people are going to ask me about how weird that was. Anyway, but congratulations really to Eric and Sundi, because they actually deserve it.
I feel like there was a question about onboarding, new people and sort of, we've said that their intro to Elixir resources are hard to find, but I don't want anyone listening to think that there's a barrier to entry. Mm-hmm. I know I've actually, like, while doing interview circuit this summer, I ran into a lot of companies that really wanted to move to Elixir and wouldn't or couldn't or didn't, or any of the negative reasons. And one that I heard a lot was just that they didn't know, like, their team didn't know Elixir yet, or only one person on the team had like a passion for the language, and there was only one, basically. And I think we've proven here that it can start with one. I think that generally, if companies want to invest in themselves and their people, that putting good time in for training and whatnot is really not a waste. There are lots of trainings out there to put entire teams through to get them somewhere, and developer happiness is a real thing. We move faster when we're really enjoying what we're doing and we're working with something that doesn't roadblock us every 5 seconds. I definitely have, I think we've all been in one of those languages at some point. So, I ran into a lot of these companies, and it was kind of the reason that I was really excited that we were going to be talking about adopting Elixir this season, because I want to hear everyone's stories. I want to hear how companies onboarded people and like why they decided to go for the unknown, quote unquote, language that no one's heard of, the niche language. I'm really excited to have those conversations with more people, because I think it's really important for more people to hear it so that they can maybe make the decision themselves,
Mm-hmm. Totally. And I didn't mean to imply that statement was not to like discourage anybody from trying to join or learn. I was just saying that like, there are a couple of really good intro resources. To your point, like there are really good resources out there. I think it's just harder to put those resources together. So I really appreciate the ones that you do find.
Well, a lot of the beginning Elixir resources maybe don't necessarily have you knowing Elixir, but they expect you to know another programming language.
Exactly.
Which, again, is like another barrier to entry. You either have resources that say you need to know some Elixir, like the basics, or you have something that says you need to know some other programming language. There's nothing out there that starts out at like that really basic level of this is what an integer is.
Except for Elixir Bridge.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
How would you know about that, Anna?
I don't know.
Does Elixir Bridge actually like start at that level of granularity? Is the curriculum online, and is it open source?
Mm-hmm. It's online and open source. Yes, we're actually in the process. We just like a month ago, we started doing a revamp because we took a break because we were pretty burnt out. Me and Matt Mills, who's my co-founder for Elixir Bridge, and so we're like revamping it so that it's up to date, et cetera. But that's the intention. That's why we started it. It was like inspiration from Rails Bridge to like help bring people into the community who are new to programming in general. And there wasn't anything at the time. And we started it like 5 years ago, I don't remember.
Very cool.
But just the idea, I'm just the point being, like, I understand how hard it is having done it. So I really appreciate it when I find other people who have put the time and effort into it.
And I think there's still, this is an opportunity, right? For when I put that sort of spin on it. I think there is still a gap between here's the cool things you can build with Elixir and like, here's the thing running in production. That to me feels like the sort of the remaining like missing piece of it. Just that I think it's hard to take some of these ideas and then go apply them in production and see them like come to fruition, right? Especially if you want to actually sort of get all of it, right? Like if you want to like live the dream, it's harder. And it just is naturally harder to deploy and manage like a stateful Elixir system, right? Assuming that you want to do that, which I think that's a draw for some people. And there's like not a lot of resources on just how to do that. And definitely not like written resources, right? Like people have given talks on it and whatever, but like there's not like here's all the steps you're going to need to go through. And the ones that do give you some kind of information are like, we assume, you have a Kubernetes already. And, it's like, okay, well, I can just go get one of those, I suppose, to deploy my like weekend hobby project on. It's it's just naturally harder, right? You can't just like windmill slam a random single threaded interpreted language into a Docker container and throw it up on Heroku, right? If you want to, you can do that, right? And you certainly can do that with Elixir. But I think a lot of people want I want all of it.
I agree.
I want the whole world, which is just naturally harder.
We should probably take a break for anyone who's traumatized over the Kubernetes comments.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
He didn't say Terraform. Oh, I did. Oops.
Oh, no.
Okay. I'll see you in 5.
You've named the beast. Oh, wait. Can we? Like,
do we really need a break?
No, I was joking.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Is this going to become #HatesKates? Because I'm like, I'm in.
We have yet to get like a really robust hashtag started, and I think that we should go for it. I mean, why not?
I need to see if
our most recent
is available.
Our big most recent client is on Kubernetes.
It's the future.
There's a DevOps team, and all we say is, like, I remember when we were starting this project, I was like we were under the assumption that I'm just gonna make a Docker file, and when it starts, it's gonna load our binary and be off to the races, and I'm not doing anything else.
Yeah, that's where that's the thing is you need a DevOps team who can run
DevOps.
Yeah, DevOps. You need a DevOps team who can run your Kubernetes for you, or you need to pay someone else's DevOps team to run your Kubernetes for you, and then you're fine. You got to get a Kubernetes in there, and then you're good to go. And you
need to get a DevOps team first.
But yeah, your DevOps team has got to get that going. DevOps, the promise of DevOps was so good. And I'm sorry, I was just going to do this for a second. But the promise of DevOps, it was like Agile, right? It was like capital A Agile was going to be so good. We had a whole manifesto. DevOps had a book with weird prose in it that taught us all about talking to people and learning from everybody, and had a Phoenix involved. And it was so good. And the promise was so good. And the walls that were between Dev and Ops were torn down, and Dev and Ops were finally communicating again. And then Ops was like, what would be good here is a wall. And then they made a new wall, but this time they made it out of YAML and Go. And then they called it Kubernetes.
I feel like I'm probably contractually obligated to say that I love Kubernetes. we do plug our Kubernetes apps on every episode of the show. So yeah, SmartLogic, we love it.
SmartLogic is a technology podcast which will deploy to Kubernetes for you.
And enjoy it.
And love it. And love every
mile the whole time.
All the YAMLs and the goes.
Yeah. You just need you need to get YAML so that you can generate.
No goes. Just Elixir. No goes.
Has anyone done like a version of Kubernetes or some kind of like competitor that is not based in Go?
Yeah, not based in Go. Yeah, I don't know. Not aware. I think Tristan talked about it, doing it in Erlang as like a control plane thing. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if anything ever came to fruition of that. Obviously, Nomad exists, right? But that's still all Go. So anyway.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, that'd be fun. It'd be cool. Anyway. So Kubernetes is a great futuristic technology that will certainly change the world. Anyway.
Let's not start the Adopting Kubernetes podcast.
No, I was trying to stay on brand.
So you all mentioned multiple times about a single person making the difference in getting to Elixir. What are the main first steps that single person can take to be successful in your eyes?
Well, they can use Emacs and just be smarter than everyone else generally.
Oh, snap. Yes, agreed.
I just got done with the FP meetup group, and they're talking about monads.
If you don't know what a monad is, go listen to our episode with Brooklyn Zelenka, because that was the single best auditory explanation of a monad of all time. But no, seriously, I mean, Travis was just a very, very smart person. And I think that
yeah, he ended up, as a side project, started writing a Lisp interpreter in Elixir and like going through all of that, what goes with that. And I think if you want to see a like 700 line cond, there's one in there.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. That's my jam.
I'm super excited about that.
I can't say that I was here for when we presented Elixir. I was like, Travis was way before my time. I can tell some listeners what maybe not to do is just walk into the room saying that Elixir is the best and you can't use anything else. I think there's a particular, way to approach it. You are advocating for a language for your team to be using, your whole team will be using, and you love it. We've all worked with that one person who loves that one language and thinks everybody needs to come in and like change the whole company around it. And a lot of people for a long time when I was advocating for Elixir thought that I had become that for Elixir. And they looked more into it, or I was motivated to make the intro to Elixir talks for the meetups. And they heard it and they were like, okay, no, I see the appeal. I see why you're saying this. Like, it's not that far out. It's not that far fetched. I think there's a balance there. You have to show your passion for it, but I think you really have to show the viability of it. My more serious hot take was that I don't think Elixir apps really crash in production as much as other languages. I don't know that I have lived on this planet enough to say that with confidence, but that has been my experience. So that's like the serious one. And then the more fun one is I always like to walk into a room and say that I didn't write a single if statement in 2019. And as a developer, nobody understands that unless they know what I'm talking about, Elixir-wise.
I will also add specific for SmartLogic, in order to convince your team to take over a new language and framework and all that. I want to say we had 12 people at that time. So like the smallness of the company also helps in that a single person has that much more say when you're that small.
How big is SmartLogic now? Am I missing?
20.
20 as of yesterday.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
Congratulations on the new hire.
Thank you. Yeah, this year has been crazy growth for SmartLogic. I think the first several years I was here, we were kind of fluctuating from like 9 to 12 employees. And this year we've just exploded. I don't know why. What's unique about 2020? I don't know.
Yeah, no, who knows? Who could say? Yeah, it's pretty much just business as usual around here. I mean, I sit around and I work at my house and I never leave. So it's just the same as far as I'm concerned. Nothing has changed in the exterior world. The people you've hired this year as you've grown, are they coming to do Elixir or to do any of the other technologies that y'all sort of champion, right?
So actually, Kubernetes was one of our hires. A couple of those are designers, as we've provided more design.
If you bump Melvin into it, we've hired 4 developers
with Elixir experience.
Yeah. Or Joel is in the indie hackers group or indie Elixir group, and he's like wants to do Elixir, but was primarily Rails.
Gotcha.
Sundi, obviously. Melvin has been around the Elixir space, and then our latest has Rails experience. So
gotcha. Yeah, so that's interesting, right? So then once you go down that path, right, and you do pick these certain sets of technology, especially in like a more niche area, right, you do start to reap the benefits of that, like because you now are getting people who either are very passionate about the language and thus sort of just know stuff about it, or you've got people who have actual real experience with it, right? So, the training part of it, you're sort of starting to arbitrage essentially, right? As you start to bring more people in. We've definitely experienced that at Bleacher Report, right? It was a place to come and do Elixir. And so a lot of people were there. It became very telling to me when all of a sudden you couldn't count on Ruby knowledge as a given anymore at Bleacher Report. Like we turned a corner where all of a sudden people were being asked to work on Ruby stuff. And they're like, I've literally never written a line of Ruby before. Like, I don't know why you're asking me to do this or why you expect me to know how to do this. Like, I know how to do Elixir, right? Like we turned that corner at some point.
That's pretty impressive.
And I'll say sort of along similar lines, I guess. So Melvin went to Turing, and they do Rails there. And like when he was exiting that and starting to look for jobs, one of the hacks he did was to specifically learn Elixir and look for Elixir jobs, because there is way less people looking for those. And so then it was easier to like get your foot in the door and not just be one of 1,000 resumes like at a Rails job.
Right.
So that's a nice little hack.
That's fair.
I will say though that while looking for Elixir jobs this summer, I noticed for the job market, well, also the 2020 summer job market was a different job market than anyone will hopefully ever see again. But it was mostly senior Elixir engineering roles. And I was just waiting. Oh, I love it when recruiters are like, oh, you need 10 years of experience in this language. And I'm like, that's longer than it's existed for. I really want to have that moment one day. But anyways, I saw a lot of, requests for senior engineers for Elixir specifically. And I was like, how can you ask that for such a young language? But I saw it quite often. But what I really didn't see was a lot of people hiring for junior engineers for Elixir. And I mean, I wasn't looking for that because that wasn't my level, but I just was really shocked. I mean, maybe not shocked, but kind of sad to see that, there wasn't that option. I guess to be fair, people who are junior level maybe know other languages, like the languages that they learn in college or the languages they're teaching in the code boot camps and whatnot. But I wish there was something we could do to bridge that gap for junior engineers. When I took Bruce Tate's Live View class over the summer with all of my free time, we did have in that class, there was one guy whose first programming language was Elixir, and he learned it with Bruce.
That's
and
awesome.
I could not tell that he had only started programming like 8 months ago. He was great. He contributed a lot of great, thought to when we're passing the keyboard around and like programming together, like mob programming, I think it's called when it's more than 2 people. It was great. And, I really couldn't tell. He picked it up so well. And some of that is the developer, but I think part of that is the language.
Yeah, I think the paradigms in the language definitely help leverage people's skills, etc. I think I'm curious also do y'all ever get questions from clients about like hiring, etc. when you were working in Elixir? Are clients ever worried about being able to hire Elixir developers? Because I've definitely run into that in the past when choosing tech to work on.
It's come up a little bit. We had one project that we started, and then I don't know if we helped them hire, but it also turned out that they hired an ex-SmartLogic employee. I don't remember how that happened, but so like that comes up a little bit. We also have not necessarily like another project we have. The main team is in Node and Mongo, and we kind of came on as saying like we can help your Node app was like kind of slow, and like we can help pull stuff into Elixir where it's like really good at doing all this. They haven't really looked into the Elixir side yet, so the goal of what we were hoping didn't really happen, but they also haven't had an issue with running the application, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. I was just curious to see.
Yeah, and I will say as a note, if there are any companies listening in or somebody who's thinking about starting a company, you don't have to hire Elixir devs either. You can just hire good developers who are willing and excited to pick up a new language, and maybe particularly they're excited to learn Elixir. But I think that provides a lot of really good opportunities to have really good developers. And I did run into some of those jobs over the summer too, where people were like, oh, we don't care if you don't know this language or that language. Like, we just want to know that you're a good fit for our team, and that you learn quickly and will work well with us. And I really appreciated those interviews because I really just felt like they invested in their people. And that's always good to see.
Anything else you all want to wrap up with before we sort of close out for today? Any other advice? Any other social media plugs? Whatever, what you got?
Why is Wallaby called Wallaby when there's also a Wallaby JS?
We were first. Testing. We were first. We were first. You can go and look. We were first. They ripped us off due to our extraordinary amount of popularity. That's what I have to say about that.
Good job, Keathley.
I think the only note or plug I will say is just, if you enjoyed this and you want to hear more adopting Elixir stories, tune into season 5 of this podcast.
Yeah.
We're going to have a lot of great guests this season. It's going to be awesome. So I totally agree with that.
Make sure that you come check us out at our podcast called Elixir Outlaws.
We don't know what we're talking about this season, so it'll be a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys seasons are either. So we're not.
Yeah, we don't have seasons either, so
Yeah.
It's just a running dialogue.
if you all want to hear us listen to Keathley's jokes, tune in.
And who doesn't? Let's be honest.
Well,
Go ahead,
And if you're
Justus.
listening at this point, we want to hear from the audience for, I guess, all of our podcasts probably, but definitely Elixir Wizards want to hear from the audience and hear what they thought of this and ideas for future episodes, future seasons. We really love hearing from the audience. It really means a lot. It makes me cry, not completely irregularly. I am rather sensitive. I know it doesn't look that way. But no, it's really touching when people reach out. So please do reach out and follow us on all the socials, Insta, Twitter. I'm just use a pen everywhere. Chris, I'll let you give the real outro.
Yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment on iTunes. It helps us, helps people find the show when you leave us a review. And we really do appreciate it. That's it for this episode of Elixir Wizards. Thank you again to our guests, Eric, Justus, and Sundi. We appreciate you for being on the show. Don't forget, Elixir Wizards is a SmartLogic podcast. Here at SmartLogic, we are always looking to take on new projects, building web apps in Elixir, Rails, and React. Infrastructure projects including, yes, Kubernetes, and mobile apps using React Native. We'd love to hear from you if you have a project we could help you with.
I got to admit, this is probably much more challenging than for us to swap roles because, like, I don't know, with script and all that.
You mean it's more challenging in the sense that, like, us coming on your show is more challenging?
Well, like, it would be really hard for me to pretend to be you because you're funny, but I imagine it's also hard.
Nailed it.
It's probably also hard for you to pretend to be us because we're organized, and so
Yeah, exactly.
All right, there you go.
Adam's like, I'm organized.
Definitely hard to be organized.
Yeah.
We're not.